Hi, everybody. This is Jim from Facilis Technology. Thanks once again for those of you who have been to previous webinars for joining me again. For those of you who are here for the first time, please sign up for the additional webinars we have for the remainder of the month of October going into next week. We have one coming up on Thursday, which is Advanced Fast Tracker Workflows. We're going to show some of the new features that Fast Tracker is promising for the next release. Next week, we're going to do the administration part 2, or again, the administration of version 8, and then Thursday, we're going to do advanced Facilis Edge workflows as well. So please check all those out. Thank you once again for coming online. I see we have a lot of attendees signed up for today. If you register for any of the webinars, you will receive a link to the video. So it's okay if you have to pop out for a minute here during this. You'll be able to see the video later and catch up with everything. So I hope everyone is settled in this morning or afternoon. I'm glad to see we have a lot of international people who have joined us, and that's great. That's why we did the early version of this, as well as the later in the afternoon for more of the West Coast people here in the US. And I'll get started. So this is part 1, redo, version 8 overview. We're going to go into the version 8 features. We're going to start off with just a recap of sort of what Facilis is and what hub server is and what underlying components are important to know about with the system in general. So we have a questions area. Go ahead and add questions in there. If I think it's appropriate at that time, I'll stop and answer them. If not, I'll wait till the end, and we can do it all at once. So this is a award-winning system. We were blessed to have several awards last year, and the last time we actually had trade shows, we were getting several awards for the hub system in general. The hub system is the shared storage environment, the shared file system, and our fast tracker and object cloud, object LTO, which takes us through asset management all the way through archive and now remote access, as we're joining in with the Edge product coming up very soon. Is currently a product that's in beta, and it allows for direct remote access, synchronization bidirectionally between facility and remote workstation. So like I said, we have a video on that right now if you've already registered for that previous webinar, and we'll be talking more about that next week as well. So it's a software-defined system, Facilis Hub, software-defined based on volume-based architecture, volume-based project-based volume architecture, and also software-defined based on our protection levels. So there's a lot of interesting technology happening under the hood here, or under the boot, if you will. But there's lots of things that we don't expose to the end user because we want to keep it simple. And I think you'll see that our interface has remained fairly simple for administration, and especially for the end user at their workstations through all of this. So I want to go over some of the key concepts of Facilis and the technology that underlies the hub systems. So we have, first off, the Facilis drive group, and that's simply the drives, whether they be hard drives or flash drives. And then we have the managed storage, which is sort of once we take those hard drives or flash drives and turn them into a pool of storage that then can be utilized for project-based volumes or volumes based on whatever category that you'd like within your workflow. And then we have the shared file system, which is really the thing that we look at as the main differentiator, because it changes the way that clients connect to the system. It takes us apart and sets us apart from network attached storage devices. So we are in a different sort of category than network attached storage, but we're not a full SAN system that you'd expect from like a heavy iron company. We don't require all that complexity. So it's sort of the best of both worlds. So getting into the drive group. Drive group can be anything from 8 to 12 to 16 to 24 drives. And the drive group itself is block level remapped. So if you get an 8 drive or a 16 drive server, you never have to burn in anything. You never have to worry about sort of how is that RAID array sort of managed. We do all that through software. It's a software-defined system, so it's all set up by the time it arrives at the reseller or at your location, and there's really nothing to do but plug it in and start creating volumes from the block level remapped pool of storage. It's remapped in that way so we can achieve consistent performance. So it ends up looking like one big device, even though it's several drives, flash or hard drives. We call that a virtual pool of storage. We can do internal spanning on the same sort of motherboard, on the same server between multiple drive groups. We can do external spanning between multiple servers, and it all ends up looking like a single volume, either network attached or local attached, as we'll see on the desktop of the client, to each client workstation. On the back end, it can be various types of configurations, but it all sort of looks very simply to the end user when you're all done. And on top of that, we have our DynaMirror storage tiering. And I'm going to go over that a little bit. That's an advanced workflow when it comes to having mirrored volumes between servers or between server groups of SSD and hard drives. So it is a manual tiering operation with SSD or flash and hard drive or mechanical drives. And it's also a way to mirror between servers as well for very critical jobs that can't have any downtime at all. And we have flash and mechanical drive optimizations. So we know, based on the creation of the drive set, whether it's a flash set or whether it's a mechanical set. And we optimize our IOs to those drives based on that. Obviously, flash is very different than mechanical. It can deal with much more randomization. Mechanical needs things a little bit more lined up and sequential in order to get the best performance out of it. So those are all optimizations that we have under the hood. Now into the managed storage. So the managed storage happens when you create this virtual pool out of that drive set. And this is Facilis managed storage that you start to create your volumes, your representations of the storage on the desktops of the clients. So once again, software defined. So on top of the software defined remapping of blocks into a single sort of pool of storage, we now have software defined volumes that are created of whatever size you want, from 1 gigabyte through 256 terabytes today, but we're going to be making use of some new technology in the next release to get us to much higher levels of single volume size if you'd like, because some customers like to have everything in one place, and that's fine. And they can be resized as well, resized up and resized down. The advantage of that, of course, is that you start out with only what you need, and you're able to move that volume up in size as needed for the project, while locking down that space for yourself. DynaRAID levels. DynaRAID is our RAID protection algorithms on the server. That is RAID 5 and RAID 6. RAID 5 is single drive failure. RAID 6 is 2, 3, or 4 drive failures. And that's on a per volume basis. And we're really unique in this way. Now, we introduced RAID 6 in version 8, which is nothing to really shout from the hilltops about. Everyone's had RAID 6 for a while now. But the way we do things is a defined method of RAID protection. So for us to incorporate RAID 6 was a lot of work. And behind the scenes, of course, our development crew in Oregon here in the United States did a lot of work to implement that. And so when doing that, we implemented it up to a 4 drive failure on a single drive group. So people with older servers who are starting to see their drives fail before they have the time or the budget for a full drive set replacement or a server replacement, they can start to create new volumes at 3 or even 4 drive failure to protect themselves against the drive failure that could cost data. And we have a unique file system per volume. This is something that can be seen in different ways by different people. If you create a volume on a Facilis system, it's a unique file system. And if you grow that volume, it grows the file system. This is different than many sort of Bitbucket network attached drive systems where the one big file system is created, and then you sort of have little shares and folders within that you then share out to the clients as, you know, permissioned volumes or network shares. That doesn't help with the fragmentation of the file system in the larger sense, because you are adding and deleting files all the time for years potentially. And, you know, unless you're doing some proactive defragmentation, which is costing you more time and more performance and more cycles on those drives, then you're going to start to see some slowdown in that. And because of that, having a unique file system per volume is, well, when the volume is done, when you're done with that project and you've archived it and you delete it and clear space back into the pool of storage, then that new volume that gets created is a whole new file system. So you never deal with that fragmentation that you would have if the large file system was in the back of all of these shares. And it's available on the server desktop for management. So all of the volumes that you create that are available to the clients are also available at the server desktop itself, and the server is running Windows. So it's very easy to get in there, see what's on the system, of course, authenticate into the operating system itself to be able to see that media, but to be able to run archives and back up to the network and anything else that you want to do, and perform some FTP transfers back and forth, or transfers through our object cloud or object LTO. So that's very useful to have on the server side as well. Now, the shared file system is really where we come into being as a differentiator for most people, because they don't care as much about the underlying mechanisms of the drive set and the managed storage. They just know, okay, well, when I have a project volume, how do I get it to the client desktop? And we do that in a very unique way. It's a custom protocol. It supports both fiber channel and Ethernet connectivity. So we started out way back as a fiber channel only system. Then we introduced Ethernet with our file system in 2009. And we did it in such a way that you could be running Ethernet or fiber channel on any client. And more recently, you could be running fiber channel and Ethernet on the same client and fail over from one to the other. So you could have a fiber channel network that if the fiber channel switch were to have a problem, it will immediately fail over to the Ethernet network. And that is something that's pretty unique. I don't know anyone else that's really doing that. So because of the start we had from fiber channel and coming into Ethernet, we're able to support both of those. And there are still definitely some fiber channel facilities out there utilizing 16 gig, 32 gig fiber channel, extremely high bandwidth, especially for Windows workstations. And then of course the up to 25 gig Ethernet on a direct client connection for Mac workstations and Linux, for example. The shared file system obscures file permissions and ownership, so that we don't have to worry about individual file and folder permissions. We don't work in the same way as a large Bitbucket approach of POSIX level permissions and ownership and attributes where they have to be managed on a regular basis. The volumes themselves are managed to permission to individual users as writable, read-only, or no access. And those permissions are very simple to use and to maintain and to add and remove. And it removes the issue of not being able to access a file, access denied, having to reset attributes on files that came in as a read-only element, things like that. We don't deal with any of that. So it removes those roadblocks. And once again shows you that the Facilis system was really built around owner-operator with people with very low, maybe technical understanding of the system, but still able to operate and administrate it very effectively. We avoid the cross-platform OS issues as well. Windows and Mac and Linux have different ideas about different file attributes and ownerships and things like that on different types of sharing protocols, and so we eliminate all of that. Basically, you can sit down at a Windows or a Mac or a Linux workstation, type in your username, and get all the permissions to all the volumes with the same exact interface as you had on the other workstations, and so that eliminates a lot of that complexity as well. Greg had a question about if the fiber to Ethernet does fail over, do I or the client get a notification the failover has occurred? Well, the notification that the failover has occurred is that the volumes will time out because of the lost connection, but they will then reappear on the desktop. If someone doesn't notice that happened, if they're away from their desk, then we don't have a good way of telling the administrator that's happened, but we feel like that's probably going to be enough to give you a heads up that something has happened. But in the meantime, those people can still work, and they can still save out their projects, and they can still access the data that they need. Enables bandwidth priority and I/O balance. So we'll get into what bandwidth priority and I/O balance is. They're pretty unique in the way that we implement them, and I think it's probably the best implementation of that type of feature set out there. And they're optimized for application requirements. So we can sort of turn on a dime when it comes to what applications require for performance from their shared storage. And we can change things as we move along in the different releases of shared file system to optimize for whether it be a Premiere, Resolve, Avid, and you name it, anything else that people are using out there, which is hundreds of different applications that are in use today on Facilis systems. So as a recap, it comes down to the drive group, which is virtualized and defined at a very low level. That turns into managed storage, and then the shared file system comes in, grabs that managed storage, and allows the administrator to create volumes which are then shared to the client workstations through a custom protocol. And at the end of all this, you have a workflow, you have permissioned volumes, you have a very simple way of making the volumes and the storage accessible to the end user clients and their workstations through a software component on both the client and the server side. So next, let's talk about sort of what the shared file system can do as represented through our web console. The web console is a new phenomenon for us from back in version 7. A few years ago, we introduced the web console that took over from the old TerraBlock Manager interface, and it's grown so much already. So we've kept the client side, very, very simple and very easy to use. Kept a lot of the complexity away from the client side, but the admin side has grown in its feature set, and I'm going to go over some of that right now. Now, it's a browser-based application, so you open up any browser and go to the admin console, whether it be on your phone or your tablet, because it doesn't require any shared file system software to run the administration console. It does require shared file system software to run the client console, because that's what's communicating with the server to mount those volumes to the desktop of those workstations. So it's only Mac, Windows, and Linux supported, although it's several flavors of each, all the way back to 10.8. Of Mac OS is supported, so we can have several different flavors of each OS running in the facility, and that's just fine. First thing I want to talk about is remote mount control. So remote mount control gives the administrator the ability to totally control what's going on at the client workstations at any given moment, without having to go to the client workstation and perform a pull on the network to get the shared file system volume to mount. They can simply push a volume onto the workstation, and they can pull it back again if needed. This gives the administrators of our products a great opportunity to be able to run things from their location without having to run around to different workstations to help them mount the volumes that they need and get access to the storage that they need. Helps them to, from my early days as running a facility in New York, running around to 22 different rooms or having one of my assistants run around to 22 different rooms and mount volumes for the day's shows. Because we're four-walling shows, and we're changing what rooms they're in any given day potentially. So that was a lot of work, and now I can do that with the Facilis system all from one location, and it's extremely simple, and I'll show you that when I get into the interface demonstration. Now, connection discovery and failover, this has to do with that failover between fiber and Ethernet, or between multiple Ethernet connections that I talked about before. So say, for example, this is a direct connection to the server over fiber channel, or maybe over 10 gig Ethernet or 25 gig Ethernet, and that goes away for some reason. Cable gets knocked out, Thunderbolt adapter gets unplugged. It'll find the next possible route to the server because it knows about all of them. As soon as you install that client software, it goes out and finds the different connections to the server across the network, and it'll find that house network connection to bring the volumes back online and allow you to save the workout and still access the media that you were accessing, even if it goes all the way to Wi-Fi. And obviously, you may notice that that's happened because you're going to have a lot slower speeds, but it lets you sort of still get your work done while that is being troubleshot at the network level. And this requires no setup on the client side. It just sort of happens. And if there happens to be a VLAN or a cross IP range, a connection that has to be made, we simply need to add that IP address in at the client side in order for that to be a preference for the server. And we'll use that as a preference. If that preferred IP address can be found, then we'll use it. And if it can't, we'll just default to whichever one we can find. Now, user account management is something that is confusing for a lot of customers, especially when it comes to network attached storage that requires, Active Directory, directory services, and things that are sort of beyond sort of what the creative person would normally know. Our user account management is extremely simple. It can start out as simple as, how are you logged in to your workstation? You logged into your workstation as you, or as Edit1, as graphics, as sort of just a generic login, then that's fine. We can permission to your workstation login directly without having to authenticate any further. If you want to authenticate further and it's a generic login like edit1, you may decide that James or Ernie or Carol or a generic producer login can be created with a password. And that's what you would use to log in to the client console. Now you can have either of these or both of these logged in at the same time. So if you have edit1 that has access on the workstation to just library volume, sound effects, stock footage, bumpers, you can have that loaded up all the time on that workstation. And then James or Ernie or Carol comes in to log in with their name and their password, and they'll get additional permissions to the project specific secured volumes. So we can append permissions on top of each other if we want to get very granular about who has access to what on what workstation. And then finally, of course, we work with Active Directory and directory services, Open Directory, even some of the web-based Active Directory or LDAP services. And we have an automatic lookup. So every time a user logs in with a domain username, we'll look up that domain username, be sure that it's in the same group, be sure it exists, and that's in the same group as it was when that volume was permissioned to that group, and then we'll show that user the volume that they can mount for their workstation. So it's extremely simple, and the IT folks like this because they can make changes within the Active Directory database, and it will ripple automatically down to the Facilis system since we're looking it up every single time somebody logs in. As you can see here in the interface, I have multiple users, but they're all logged in different ways. MacPro 2019 is the desktop user, and that's very generic. But I have Jim M for my system, and I have Jason at and John at our Facilis.LAN domain, which is an Active Directory user. So I can have multiple users logged in different ways if I want to. It doesn't have to follow the same rule across the board, so it's very flexible for you to use. Now this is our RAID 6. As I mentioned, everyone has RAID 6, but it's a static RAID 6. Most, if not all, of the systems that you'll be talking about have 2-drive failure RAID 6. And it's set up at the very beginning when the drives are brand new to have 2-drive failures. Now that's going to persist as the drives get older. You can only have 2-drive failures. So for us, we can set the system up to start with a 1 or 2-drive failure. We say that, I like to say that an 8-drive system doesn't need RAID 6. In 8 drives, it's so incredibly rare to have a 2-drive failure, knock on wood, that, I still like RAID 5 as a protection level there because it saves you space in the system and gives you back some of that to use for your usable space. So a single drive failure in an 8-drive group, a 2-drive failure by default in a 16-drive group. But then as the drives get older, or there's something very critical, or you have something that you want to sell as a service to your clients and say, like, you can do 3 or 4 drive failure and you still have all your data, you can do that. And until the data becomes unusable, you can go through 4 drives of failure. And that's as simple as setting up the volume here, as you can see, choosing the group, choosing your DynaMirror protection. We also offer unprotected, and that's more for our DynaMirror. We can have an unprotected volume on the flash group and then a RAID 6 volume on the mechanical group, and they will be mirrored to each other, which I'll show you in a moment. So that's the only reason I could see or recommend using unprotected is if it's also mirrored to another drive group as well, so the data is protected there. Now, bandwidth monitoring and bandwidth priority go hand in hand. We have a nice monitoring window within the admin console, which shows you historical data of all the users that have been on the system. And you can see when someone is sort of spiking up in their performance and maybe putting a higher load on the system. So you might see this happen as an example. On a normal day, everyone sort of uses what they need. Everyone is just sort of straight line and they hit play and it plays and everything is good. But then, on a given day, especially if you have many more, 10 or 20 more clients on board with the system, one user could spike up, maybe doing a fast copy over 10 gig or 25 gig or 16 gig fiber channel or something, fast ingest to the system, and then all of a sudden the other users will pop down. That's a standard sort of NAS thing that happens. NAS looks great in a benchmark, but when you have multiple people hitting the drives at the same time, there's really very little control about what you can do there, unless you go in and set VLANs and knock people down to 1 gig and things like that. So what we can do is we can do a bandwidth priority. So with bandwidth priority, I can set the one that the person I need to have full performance all the time to high priority. In that case, that normal user who was spiking before might spike a little bit less and get a little bit less throughput than he had before. He might knock down the other normal users a little bit, but he won't touch the high priority user, and that high priority user will continue to work as they had before. Alternately, and this is the example, if you know, I always say if you get a complaint from someone, make them a high priority user. But if you know that there's someone that's always putting extra load in the system, you could do the reverse and make that person a low priority user so that they won't be able to spike up during their copy processes or the ingest process if it means the server will get into an overloaded state, and everybody will still just maintain, because the normal users are higher priority than the low priority user. So lots of different ways we can do that, but it's a very simple way to implement, because you see here in the Mac Pro client settings, I set bandwidth priority to low, normal, or high, and that takes place immediately. That priority is immediately effective on the next I/O that comes in, and it will reprioritize based on those settings. So nothing you have to reboot the system for, nothing you have to change cabling for, or unmount and remount the volume or anything. It just happens. So let's go over server roles, failover of servers, and mirror, because this is all, you know, part of the same feature set. With version 8, we've introduced server roles, and server roles are a way for us to have a multi-server environment and have the servers sort of have a certain place in that, depending on how you want either failover or fallback or aggregation to work between multiple servers. So for example, this is a normal situation where you just have two servers that are sharing out to maybe the same or different clients at the same time with no problem. If you decide that you want to have a connection between the servers, we recommend 32 gig fiber channel backbone connection between the servers. Using DynaMirror, I can add one server as the aggregator and the other server as the fallback, so that if I do have a mirrored volume between two servers, the aggregator will always be sharing that volume out to the clients until and if the aggregator has a problem and needs to be shut down, in which case the fallback server will take precedence and share that same data out to the clients. This is a nice way to make servers redundant, but here you'd have to have actually both servers connected to the network at the same time with sort of the same speed of connectivity. In the same way, if you wanted RAID 60, you could do the same thing, but with a RAID 60, the secondary server wouldn't share out the data, because if one server goes down, well, I mean, that's half of your data, because you're spanning it between both. You're striping the servers and not mirroring the servers. So one server would always be an aggregator, the other one would be labeled as storage only, which means that if the aggregator had to be shut down, the storage only server won't take requests from the clients, because it can't share those volumes out, because half the volumes are offline for a moment until that server comes back online. Now with the Hub 1, we have a way of doing both RAID 60 and RAID 61 in a more efficient way. The Hub 1 is an aggregator, a defined aggregator and a dedicated aggregator of the system. So as the aggregator, it's always sharing everything out to the clients that the other servers are producing. Now you could say the other servers can be fallback, because either of those two servers, if they are interconnected over fiber channel, can take the role of sharing those volumes out. Either one, as long as they have some connection to the network. So it could be a full fallback where both of those servers have full 10 or 100 or 40 gig connection to the network, or they could have just a stopgap fallback, which is maybe they just have a 1 gig connection, but at least everyone's able to still see the data and get some work done while you figure out why the power went out on the aggregator, for example. And so you can see here the very simple general settings within the admin console. I have server role, aggregator, fallback, normal, and storage only. And that will determine what that server does to other servers or with other servers that are connected over fiber channel to that server. This is more like I have two normal servers, and this is the DynaMirror aspect of the system. If I have two normal servers and they're just sharing out to the clients with no problem, but I decide that one day, you know, I have this ultra critical job. I just can't have any potential downtime at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a fiber channel link between these two servers, and I'm going to make a project volume that is mirrored between them. Now, it doesn't really matter which server hosts that mirror because it's using both servers at the same time, and it's reading off both servers at the same time when it comes to that mirror. What's nice about this is that if one server does need to be shut down for any reason, in a normal case, maybe that was the server that would have had the project volume and be hosting it. The other server has the mirror of the project volume, and it will simply keep sharing that out to the client workstation. So this is a way, just with the two server environment, without even having an aggregator, that you can set up a DynaMirror or a RAID 61, if you will, mirror between the two servers, where you have two RAID 6 versions of the data mirrored between each other, and each server can fail over for the other in the case where that volume needs to be shared. This is IO balance. IO balance is something that we implemented because like bandwidth priority, we decided that facilities should have more control over the different methods of workflow that they have. So IO balance gives us a way to set priority on reads or writes. So this is not priority on workstations, this is priority on the kind of data that's being written or read. So in a normal environment, I might have maybe a camera that's being captured all the time, or a satellite feed, something real time that's coming into the system that's always writing to the drives. In that case, I might set the write priority at a higher than the read priority, because for me it's okay if the server gets overloaded. And the only case that bandwidth priority or IO priority comes into play is if the server becomes overloaded. The nice thing about bandwidth priority, which I failed to mention, is that even a low priority client will still have full bandwidth of the connection that they have until the server gets to an overloaded condition. And that at that point, priorities will kick in. And the same as this, priorities will kick in if the server becomes overloaded, but the reading clients will drop frames or do whatever while the writer clients will succeed. Alternately, if you have a facility that does more screenings, more real-time playback, has very expensive rooms that people are over the shoulder of the editors sort of watching what they're doing, and you want those reads to succeed, you'll keep the default setting of read priority over write priority, because in this way you won't have to worry about someone coming in and doing a large copy while someone is trying to read from the system. And doing a large copy into the system can be also managed with bandwidth priority on that client workstation. But if you set it as default, where write priority is lower than read priority, there's already some measure of handling of that situation. Finally, verify priority can be used if all your activity is happening on the facility at the same time as a recovery, or maybe you have overnight renders or overnight copies, something happening, but overnight you want to replace this drive and make sure that it's recovered by the morning. You can set verify priority as the highest, which means that the recovery of the drive failure will be prioritized over any other activity. So this gives the administrator a great way to go in and set up the different priorities of IO requests to the system to really fine tune for their particular facility. And I don't know of many other situations or many other SAN systems that let you go this deep to determine priority for your facility. This is an overview of the product set in general. So the product family consists of hard drive servers, stacked servers, and flash and hybrid servers. We have multiple chassis combinations that we can do, a 2U, a 4U. We still have a 5U chassis that is our Hub 24. And the hard drive servers start off with the Facilis 8, which is a entry-level system, can be upgraded with dual power supply, can be upgraded with mirrored internal OS, but comes with neither of those as a cost-saving measure, so you can get into the system very, very cost-effectively. Now the Hub 16 is our first Hub branded product, and that is added to by the XP16 to become a Hub 32. So Hub 16 and Hub 32, the only difference is it has an expansion on it, and that's either one group of 16 drives or two groups of 16 drives that can be internally spanned and create, like I mentioned before, that one volume in the managed storage between all 32 drives. So it's a very fast system and very well load balanced system. The Hub 1 stack is using that aggregator, that dedicated aggregator, in addition to multiple servers. And the dedicated aggregator is useful for redundancy. You could have multiple Hub 1 chassis or Hub 1 servers that can fail over for each other. And you can also have DynaMirror between the servers that can fail over for each other. So you could have 1 or 2 points of failure on the system and still maintain uptime with a fully redundant system like this. So the Hub 1 gives us that. It gives us the ability to perform intra-server mirroring seamlessly, so that even if one server were to have a problem and need to shut down, the other server is supplying that mirrored data, and the clients don't even realize that a server has been shut down. Of course, our telemetry and your email notification that you'll set up will determine that, and we'll send you that information. Then our flash and our hybrid servers. Our flash servers start with 8 drive systems. We also have a 16 drive system that's pure flash. And that's very useful. We've sold some of those to audio environments, lots of small random files. We've sold some of those as hybrid to boutique post-production that requires uncompressed video playback at the same time as the standard 1080 or UHD compressed playback that's happening in the rest of the facility. And the hybrid models, either with an 8 drive system with an expansion or as a hybrid 16 with a single 4U enclosure, makes great use of that storage tiering. Now the flash storage tiering you can create a volume that is on both flash and mechanical at the same time. Flash can be unprotected, as I showed before, with that volume creation, married to a RAID 6 mechanical volume as well in a mirrored way. And then when you're reading back the data, it's reading only from the SSD, but when you're writing to everything, it's writing to both mechanical and SSD. And then at the end of the project, it comes time to give back that space on the flash group. You can delete or separate the volume from the mechanical, but leave the mechanical online. So you still have that data in a mirrored fashion on the larger capacity hard drive group. So I guess it's a manual storage tiering, but we've replaced systems in the field that have used the storage tiering algorithms and SSD caching front ends, because the algorithms don't always work for post-production, especially project-based post-production, where you have large amounts of data that need to be read back first thing in the morning when you hit play on the timeline. Doesn't always work if it's not cached in SSD. So we like the idea of having a dedicated mirrored volume that's SSD and hard drive until the point when the SSD is no longer required, and then you can move on with just the hard drive data. So those are the different types of systems that we offer. Going through each one, you can see that there are both capacity differences and benchmark differences between these. We use benchmark as a sort of overall performance metric for the system, and our benchmarking is not based on just doing a speed test on the server itself. It's based on having multiple clients through the shared file system with multiple connection methods running tests against the server at the same time. So it is a client-based benchmark, not a service benchmark, which is very important. And when you want to have more of a sort of stream count benchmark or a stream count metric to use, we always have guaranteed system performance based on our stream counts. And the stream counts are they're very healthy for the type of system that it is. Of course, if you go to the Hub 16S or the hybrid system, you'll get a lot more of the lower bit rate, because there's a lot of randomization that happens, which SSD flash doesn't necessarily have a problem with. And then all the way down to Facilis 8, you can still see that I'm doing 14 streams of 220. I'm doing 6 streams of 6K red at 7:1 24p. And these are conservative. These are based on the idea that even if everyone hits play at the same time, I still have a buffer of someone who's doing a copy, some chaos in the facility, because there's never just this many clients that all hit play. So we like to over deliver but under promise in this way, because in the end the customers have a better feeling about the system when you do that. So just a little bit more about types of systems, the types of components that we have. Once again, the Hub 1 server is the aggregator, is the dedicated aggregator that can be placed along with multiple of the server systems. Or the underlying server systems. The XP16 is used as an expansion, especially for the Hub 16 to make it a Hub 32. But the XP16 can be used on any existing Hub or TerraBlock system that's currently in the field, as we stopped shipping TerraBlock in 2019. And it can be used as an expansion of those systems. Just appears as another drive group. It can be spanned internally now with version 8. You can span multiple different types or size groups. You can span a 12 or 24 with a 16, and it takes care of the load balancing for that. The NL16 is a sort of a tier 1 offload. You can offload to the NL16. It's just a nearline array. We're not selling as many of those now because the main purpose of that before was to provide RAID 6 nearline, and we have now RAID 6 in software that we can use. So we can simply do an expansion if you need nearline in RAID 6, and it's much more integrated into the system when you do that. Facilis Object Cloud and Edge Sync. And this is part of our archive and remote access feature set. We started with this, I believe last week. We had the Object Cloud webinar, and in 2 weeks we're going to have another one, or sorry, next week we're going to have another one with advanced workflows for Edge Sync and Object Cloud. The Edge Sync node for remote sync is a node that exists at the remote workstation location and provides synchronization to the main facility. And that edge node then shares out its cache volume to the workstation on site or in the remote location. So its job is to sort of act as a node or as a spoke to the central server, which is also cloud storage intermediary being synchronized to the remote desktops. And so that's the way that we're accommodating project and media sharing between multiple workstations and in-facility storage. And then finally, our object LTO, backup and delivery through LTFS. We support up to a 48 slot library that we sell through Qualstar. And our object LTO is, we sold a lot of those in 2019. This year obviously is a lot more cloud because people want to have that remote access and want to be able to utilize an archive that also gives them the ability to have media offsite and available for remote workstations. So that is the presentation. I want to get a little bit into the interface, if I can, and show you some of the more specific features of the web console, the admin console. This won't go into full administration. If you look at the videos we have available, last Thursday we did, or last Tuesday rather, we did the admin, and that's happening again next Tuesday, a week from today, would be redoing the admin webinar. So it gets very deep into the admin functionality of version 8. But just looking at this to start, this is my admin console. As you can see here, I have multiple tabs across the top, and I have a listing, because I'm on the volumes tab, of all the volumes that exist on this system. I have DynaRAID everywhere from RAID 6.2, RAID 5, mixed stripe, mixed mirror. I show you, if I can show you here, the mixed mirror storage. It includes two different servers, one which is running a RAID 5 volume, one which is running a RAID 6.2, and those are mirrored together. So they're connected over fiber channel with each other, and from either of those servers, I can host the volume to the clients, and it's a mirrored situation. So if either server has a problem, the data exists on the other server immediately on a block level. As soon as it's written to one, it's written to the other. A mixed stripe is simply the same thing. I'm striping together for performance purposes and load balancing two different volumes that have two different protections on two different servers. And those types of, the flexibility inherent in this type of setup is really unavailable on any other system. The ability to go in there and set things as low as the RAID protection level, where the volume exists on which group of many or which group of a single group server is very unique. So as you can see here, I have my permissions set up on a per volume basis, and I can set up desktop users, which is that Mac Pro 2019 desktop user. I can set up a local user, which means that the user is a local login to this server, or I can set it up as a domain user, which means the user is part of the Active Directory domain, and that's how they're logging into their remote workstation. But very simple here to add permissions, whether it be to a desktop user, a local user list. It just drops down and I can see all the users here. And if I go to local users, there's all the same users there. And I can also see my Jump Cloud LDAP, which is a web-based LDAP Active Directory, and we also have an Active Directory internal here to the facility that I can access as well if I just add that domain in. And it's just simply group, user, everyone, write access, read access, and I'm done with it. And you can see there that the accesses are different depending on read or write access on a per login or basis or per workstation basis for the desktop users. So moving on to the Clients tab, which is another very specific and interesting and unique feature that we have, is the ability to see any of these clients and see what exactly is going on their desktop. So I see that I have just 2 volumes mounted on my Pro 2019. If I bring up the Mac Pro 2019 here, you can see after I log in, you can see here that there's those 2 volumes, CMG and Brandstar, and the interface on the desktop of this Mac looks exactly like the interface that I have here because it's meant to. This is offering the administrator of the system a way to be the client as well and do anything on the client's workstation that they want from the location of the administrator. So if I want to mount the CoolFire volume onto the desktop of the Mac, I simply hit mount here, and the CoolFire volume mounts up to the Mac workstation, as you can see here. Now it's mounting up looking a little bit different because the CoolFire volume, if I go into here, is set up, is set up as a network multi-user, so it shows up as a network drive. These other volumes are set up to look like a local multi-user drive, so it looks like a local hard drive to the operating system. And that's all the way deep into the operating system itself. It shows up here as a local hard drive. It shows up here as just a generic volume, and it shows up as a AvidFS as well. So this is a emulation mode Avid specific or Avid compatible volume, as well as looking like a hard drive in the desktop. So it's kind of unique, and you don't see many other systems that can do that. And I think that the way that we're performing this work with accessing client locations, accessing the volumes that are on the desktop of the clients, being able to change that at any time through a simple push of a button is very unique. And so that's our method of client push of volumes, and of course I can unmount that volume as well from the desktop, and it gracefully asks the client software to unmount that volume from the client. It's not just unplugging it. So it's a graceful way to do it, and it's a fully flushed and fully safe way to do it. So you see here, I can even log in for the client. So you see here, I have these couple users that are logged in to different servers, and I can log in a client from this location as well to give more permissions to that client workstation as the administrator. So our administrator to use this method and this feature to obscure the client software completely from the client workstations. They may even remove the shortcut altogether. And not have the client log into the client software and just do everything from the administrator workstation, from the administrator console. And so that's a good option to have if you have a lot of freelance people that you don't want to worry about training. Certainly there's a lot of value in doing that. Just one more look here at my stats tab. Not much going on here, but I can see that I have if I look at a couple of days worth of time, I can see that there is a bump in activity here. I can go back to historical data, weeks at a time, and go back well into the history of the server to see exactly what each client or each volume was doing. I can see multiple volumes here. If I go to clients, I see that there's probably only a couple clients that were accessing this demo server. And I can see read or write data or total data. And I can go into logs here as well. And in going into logs, I can see that all the activity, who unmounted, who mounted the volume over time, is all here, and that can be exported as well. So lots of information here that we can give you, and then finally, those settings that I mentioned before, the server role, aggregator, fallback, normal, the ability for everyone to get access to volumes as soon as they're created, for example, write or read access. Admin console login access is an important one, the ability to who gets to log into the admin console. If you have an administrators group, which we do by default on every server, then anyone in the administrators group can log into the admin console. And all of these are local users that have passwords. So all you need to do is type in the IP address of the admin of the server, bring up the admin console with a login screen, and type in that user with password, and you get access to that admin console. So it is secure. Not everyone will be able to get access here. You can see here that bandwidth management IO balance is set. This is set to the default of read priority. And I can also configure email alerts. Email alert configuration, we also have telemetry. So the system, if it's on the internet, it has an error, we may know about it before the customer knows about it. So that's an important thing. Often we'll be sending emails to a customer to say that you have a drive error, can you send us a log? Let's do a drive test to see if that drive might be failing. So customers really appreciate that proactive approach that we can give them. And the email notification is for you. Please don't send all your emails to support@facilis.com. We get the telemetry anyway. So that would be for you to get some indication that something may have had an error to your personal email address. So as I mentioned, the admin version of this goes much deeper into all aspects of the admin console, and that's available next Tuesday. And we also did that last Tuesday if you want to look up the video for that. But with the last few minutes we have here, I want to check to see if there's any questions on what we went over, either the models, the feature set of the shared file system, how we combine servers together, how we can support different client OSs, different applications, how we can support project sharing on Adobe, on Avid, on Resolve. Please just fire away if you have any questions for me at this point. If you haven't seen the Fast Tracker application yet, it's definitely a big part of our system these days. And the Fast Tracker Advanced Workflows is happening on Thursday, another webinar. We also have a video from the initial Fast Tracker overview that I did, I believe, 2 weeks ago. And that's available on the webinar site as well. Greg has asked a good question about what happens if you're on a closed network. You can make use of neither telemetry nor email alerts. Certainly, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of Windows log monitoring applications out there that do local alerts, SNMP, for example, and that's something you can set up to find alerts that might be posted by our software, and we can definitely help you with that if that's something that you want to do for a closed network that as you have LAN connectivity to the server, but it doesn't have WAN connectivity. Then that's really the only way, is to get a log monitoring application. That there are lots of them out there. It's a very, very popular sort of IT product in several manufacturers of that. So I'd recommend that, Greg, for the local area network indications of any errors that are happening. Okay, so Scott's asking if it's on the internet, if the server's on the internet, how often does it get updated for security patches, etc. It leaves here with updates off because we think that's the default for us, because we don't know if anything will conflict. You are free to turn updates on, and we test the updates as soon as they become available here, and we're on the same schedule as every other sort of Microsoft component out there, and we will of course let you know if there's something that you should be concerned about. So far we haven't found any issues for years with automatic updates happening. We keep them off by default just because it's the safer way to go for us to ensure that there is continuity of functionality and avoiding things that we don't know about. Anybody else have any questions about the Facilis servers? shared file system in general? If not, I'll thank you very much, and I hope you got a lot of information out of this that you wanted. And if you have any other questions, I'm jim@facilis.com. You'll be getting a email about the availability of the video, so you'll be able to rewatch that at your convenience. And please check out the remainder of the webinars that we have available that we'll be doing this Thursday and through next week as well. Okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the day or evening. Thank you.